Hey guys, my name is Amy and today I wanted to show you my Peperomia collection. Peperomia have been my favourite genus of plant to collect since I sort of transitioned from collecting mostly like your typical cacti and succulents onto more tropical houseplants, as they are a pet-friendly option with a huge variety. They're also very affordable. You won't find a Peperomia going for triple digits. In garden centres and online, I've typically seen them run from just a few pounds up to maybe 25 quid, which makes them very easy to collect. I also love the variety you can get with Peperomia. They can look wildly different to each other and you'd have no idea that they came from the same genus. I have 18 different Peperomia to show you today, and I will start with my largest one. This is a Peperomia Scandins, an all green one. There are a couple of different varieties you can get with different variegation, but this is the plain green one and I absolutely love it. It's very full on one side, but we've got some cuttings growing in at the back here as well. I originally purchased a variegated one and part of the plant was going through all green and I realised I preferred that. So I ended up chopping up the whole plant. If you cut here on the petiole versus the stem, you want to cut here, the variegation will revert. So if you have one of these and you'd like to get an all green one as well, you can make it from the plant you already have. I've had this for about 3 years, I think, and yeah, this whole plant has grown from leaf cuttings. It grew significantly faster than the variegated one, and I just love how wild it looks. It's really starting to trail down nicely now. So that is Peperomia Scandins. Next up, this is Peperomia Incarna, and I got this one earlier this year and it was a wish list plant for a long time that didn't seem to pop up very much in the UK, and when it did, it was quite expensive for only a small piece of the plant. So when I found this one going for I think £5 on eBay, I snatched it up and so far it's doing really well. It's got a few newer leaves growing out the top there. It's definitely slightly slower growing than other Peperomia I have, but I can definitely see new growth in the few months that I've had it. And this is a gorgeous felty Peperomia. I think it might be called the felted Peperomia. It might have another name as well. Hopefully you can see, especially on that new growth, that lovely velvety felty texture. This is a much more succulent variety of Peperomia. I leave this one in direct sunlight and I water it when the leaves are starting to feel a bit thin. You can see there I'm bending it and it's not got much give. If it was to feel a lot more sort of floppy, you can really bend it in, then you know it's time to water it. But that is Peperomia Incarna. Next up, this is one of my oldest Peperomia. I've had this for several years now and it only started as small cuttings, but this is Peperomia Rotundifolium and it is this really lovely delicate little Peperomia, and hopefully you can see there it's actually blooming. Peperomia have what are called sort of rat tail inflorescence. A piece has just fallen out which I will propagate, but I've had this for several years. I've got a few cuttings rooting in my prop box and I'm excited to have a really full plant that will hopefully start to trail down fairly soon. And now I've got another piece to propagate. Not quite sure what happened there. But what's fun about these, all Peperomia in my experience are really easy to propagate. To propagate this stem, need to free up some of these nodes by taking the leaves off, but you can also propagate with these leaves, so none of the plant has to go to waste. Peperomia Rotundifolia. Next up, I've got two different varieties here. This is Peperomia Ecclesiophilia, and I've got a all green one and a variegated one. This is the newest one in my collection, and I just absolutely fell in love with how big the leaves are. A lot of Peperomia stay quite small and compact, so to find a really large one like this is really exciting. And then this one here, you can see it has some lovely cream and pinky variegation, especially on these lower leaves. And I'm excited to see how both of these do as time goes on. They're both fairly new to my collection. I got this one in July, and it's definitely put out some new growth since bringing it home. You can see there's a really nice new leaf just there, and then that one. Really pretty variegation. And hopefully one day it puts out leaves as big as this one. I'm so excited with this one. I love how dark the leaves are as well and really nice and glossy. And yeah, they're almost as big as my hand. They're really cool. But those are Peperomia Ecclesiophilia, and I think they also go by Peperomia Ginny and Peperomia Jelly, but I don't know if that just applies to the variegated ones. Next up, this is another peperomia I've had for quite a while. This is Peperomia Prostrata, or the string of turtles, and you can see why. It's got the most gorgeous turtle pattern to the leaves, and this one is also in bloom. Hopefully you can see a couple there. Again, I grew this one all from cuttings and it's doing pretty well. There's a few patches at the back that I think are struggling a bit. I wonder if they've perhaps dislodged from the soil. I've really enjoyed growing this one. It was, yeah, just a couple of small cuttings that have grown into this curtain of turtles. At some point I think I will take some more cuttings of this one and try and fill it out all the way around the pot, as it is all sort of on one side at the moment. But I also do quite like how that looks. I think it's really cute. I've seen massive baskets of this on Instagram and they're just so cool. Really unique. And fun to propagate. You'll get patches like this where you'll get some bald stem, which if you want you can just chop and throw in some water, or what I usually do is perlite prop box, and once they've rooted you can pop them back in to the plant. I'd recommend using something like hairpins or gardening wire to pin down any propagations you add to your plant, because they do sort of pop out, I find. There's another one that's gotten quite bare that I may chop at some point. But yeah, Peperomia Prostrata. I'll show you a few smaller ones now. I've got a couple here that I grew from leaf cutting. This is Peperomia Frost, and hopefully you can see the mother leaf just there, that big one that is putting out all of these babies there. And then I've got a Peperomia Rosso, which is so cute. It's doing really well. And yeah, these are both leaf cuttings that I rooted in my prop box, and once they started to push out these little babies, I potted them up into soil, and if you want you can then keep them in some kind of humidity. I do find that speeds up the growth, but these have been out of any extra humidity for quite a while and they're still doing really well. I love this one, that is so cute. So Peperomia Rosso and Peperomia Frost, and then another little one I have here is my Peperomia Greyhound, and it doesn't look like much at the moment. I got it I think a year ago and didn't realise in the garden centre that it had quite bad thrips, so all of the adult leaves died off and this is what we're left with. And it has pushed out new growth, it's just staying quite small, but I'm hoping that this is one of those plants that just has a long acclimation period, especially with the shock of having pests. So I reckon at some point it will suddenly bounce back and produce lots of lovely new growth. But that is Peperomia Greyhound. And lastly, for the really diddy ones, I've got Peperomia Green Bubble, which is very similar to the Greyhound. It's just a much more green version with these lovely sort of contrasted looking leaves. I don't know the best way to describe that, but the dark, almost brown inside the ridges paired with the bright green tips of the bubbles. I just think this is such a cool looking peperomia. I think it's almost reptilian looking. And I have a couple of leaves of this that I popped off while I was potting it up that are in my prop box that have rooted, so hopefully we'll have a few propagations of this soon. And it has put out this lovely new growth since getting it in the last month, I think. This is another fairly new one. So Peperomia Green Bubble. Next up, this is, I think, probably the most hard to come by peperomia I have in my collection. This is Peperomia Liodenzis. If you do want one of these and you're in the UK, there are one or two on eBay, sorry, at the moment. And this is the Velvet Tree Peperomia, Peperomia Liodenzis. And it's so cool, it looks almost like a big basil. It's just really unique, and it has this thick stem, so it really does look like a little tree. I'm slightly worried about it at the moment. The top part looks really lovely, but I have lost quite a few of these lower leaves in quite a short amount of time lately, and you can see there's a couple more that are starting to yellow there. But I haven't noticed any pests. However, there are some, I don't know if you can see, some marks on the leaves as though there would be pests, but I haven't seen anything, and I do keep checking this plant as it's one of my favourites, and I'd be really sad if anything happened to it. This is a really cool peperomia to grow. The picture of the mother plant that I bought this from looked like it was several feet tall, which is quite unusual for a peperomia. So if you do have or want one of these are a variety that have the potential to grow quite large, and it has the softest velvety texture to the leaves. It is so lovely, and I love the colour as well. It's this really, really, not quite neon, but almost neony green. And as I was saying earlier, with the variety of Peperomia, like these to me don't look like they come from the same genus. So interesting. So I believe there is a Peperomia out there for everyone. I've had this for maybe coming up to 6 months now, and we've definitely had some new growth. I'm just going to keep an eye on these lower leaves that keep dying off, but at least the new growth, other than some marks, does seem to be coming through okay. And I love this so much. This is definitely one of my overall favourite plants in my collection, Peperomia Liodenzis. I'm at the point where I've got to try and remember what I have and haven't shown yet. I don't think I've done this one. So this little one is I think it's a Peperomia Obtusifolia, but I've also seen it go under the Peperomia Optaban, but I'm pretty sure it is just a Peperomia Obtusifolia. And this one is so pretty. It's just really cute, I think. It's got these really pink stems. I don't know how well it's showing up on camera. Really lovely pink stems and a really fine pink edge to the leaves with a sort of green and yellow variegation. And it's just a very, very cute plant. It was a bit of an add-on while I was in Perrywoods, just because it was only $2.99. This one's got really lovely succulent leaves. You can see there I'm adding pressure and there's just no give to it at all. So it's really nice and easy to tell when this needs a water, because these leaves will feel really, really thin. You'll be able to squeeze them in. I think it's called the taco test. It's great for a lot of plants, determining whether or not they are thirsty. But I just love the pattern on those leaves and the little pops of pink that you get from the stems and the edges. So that is Peperomia Obtusifolia. Next up, I think this is the oldest Peperomia in my collection. I've had this for a long, long time. And I actually got it for free. I was in a garden centre and I found a piece of it on the floor that had broken off another plant. And I went looking around the garden centre to try and find the plant it broke off, because I'd been wanting to get one of these for a while and I couldn't find it. I guess they'd all sold out and this was just the only piece left. And so I asked one of the people working there if I could take it home, and they said that was absolutely fine. And he was saying that with working in a garden centre, his kitchen was just full of jars of broken pieces of plant that he would find at the end of his shift and take home and see if they'd root and grow. So I thought that was really cool. But yeah, he said it was absolutely fine for me to take this, and it's grown into this lovely full pot now. I don't think I've said what it is. Peperomia Hope. And Peperomia Hope is a hybrid of two other Peperomias, which I can't think of off the top of my head, so I'll write it down below. But it is this really cute little button Peperomia, I think. It's got these lovely thick succulent leaves, and this year this one especially has just done really well. It has really filled out at the top there, so I'm really keen to see all of those pieces start to trail out of the pot now. Like most Peperomia, this one is again really, really easy to propagate. You can propagate through the stem, where again you need to free up a node by removing the leaves, but you can propagate with just a leaf cutting. So if I was to chop here, none of this plant would go to waste. And again, it's nice and easy to see when this plant needs watering. This is a very succulent type of Peperomia that would be quite susceptible to overwatering. But as you can see with this section here, this piece is a cutting that I've recently potted in, so it's just getting thirstier than the rest of the plant. But can you see it's quite wrinkled on the leaf there? Hopefully you can see that, which is a really nice visual indication that the Peperomia Hope is ready for a drink. Hopefully you can see, especially on that leaf there. So if you see quite a lot of that over your plant, you know that it's time for a water. This one hangs at my back door, which gets direct morning light, and it seems quite happy there. It's just doing really, I think this is so cute. It's doing really, really well, and I'm super duper happy with it. You can see some really cute new growth there. This is definitely one that I always want to have in my collection. If anything, touch wood, happened to this, I would not hesitate to go and get another one. Next up, this is Peperomia Polybotria, or is this the raindrop? I know there's a teardrop and a raindrop. I think this is the raindrop, but yeah, Peperomia Polybotria. And this is two plants that I potted together. I was in one of my local garden centres, and there was one really dehydrated, sad, reduced peperomia, and I thought I'm going to bring it home and combine it with my one, which I think is this piece here, the slightly smaller leaves, and then this very big piece is the new part that I've added to it. This is a peperomia that has the ability to grow quite large. As you can see by the size of these leaves, it can grow very tall, and I really hope that I'm able to get this one to do that. So I'm hoping I'll be able to grow this really nice and tall. This is a good example, actually. I can show you. This is usually a very thick succulent plant that won't have too much give in it if you try and squeeze it, but you can see there, this is ready for a drink. So it's another one that's really nice and easy to tell when it's thirsty. If you've got quite a few of these leaves that are starting to feel very thin, very, very flexible, then you know it's time for a drink. One thing to note, that only really works with the more mature leaves, because the newer growth will come in very soft until it hardens off anyway. So it's only if your older, more mature leaves are feeling very thin that you know that it's time for a water. But I just love how glossy this plant is. It's really, really kind of waxy looking, and especially once it starts to grow up and get tall, it's a really sort of sculptural plant, and one that, like most of the peperomia I have, I'd say, is very easy to come across. And you can get them in all different stages. You can get them where they're already putting off quite large leaves, or you can buy smaller ones, and they're really fun to propagate. I've got a few pieces rooting at the moment, and then a little tiny pot of propagations that once they've got a big enough root system, I'll be adding them all to the same pot, and then have a massive Peperomia Polybotria. Next up, I'd say this is my most succulent peperomia that I have. This is the Peperomia Dolibriformis, and it is a really quirky looking little plant. I think it kind of looks like something from another planet, and this one is also, hopefully you can see, just starting to bloom at the top there. A really, really interesting plant, and it's got a very thick stem but also very, very thick leaves. So this is one that can very happily handle being underwatered, and this one also gets bright direct light. It sits right by the window that gets morning light, and it's doing really well. We've definitely had lots of new growth up at the top here, and then a couple of little sections there and there that are starting to push out new growth. Are you all right, puppy? When I saw this, I just thought it was such a fun little plant. I know are fairly common, but I don't see them that often. And there's another, at least one, I think the Ferrier, the Happy Bean, that's quite similar, but it's got slightly longer leaves coming off. And these have, hopefully you can see down the centre of the leaf, these little windows. And that's what the plant uses to bring all the light in and sort of refract it around the leaf, as opposed to something like this that has an obvious top and a bottom. These ones, it's almost like they have one side and then they end in this window, and that's how they filter all their light through, which is really, really interesting. Slightly slower growing than other peperomia I have, but still really, really cute and fun to watch it put off these sort of new heads to the plant. Another one in there, really, really cute, and I'm really keen to see what this will do over time. Really, really cool, and I would quite like to have the Ferrier as well at some point in my collection. I think we're down to the final three. I don't think I've missed anyone yet. This is a Peperomia Lilian, and this is such a pretty plant. I got this reduced for only £2, and it's done really well, and I've got loads of pieces of this propagating that at some point I will again probably end up adding in to one pot. This is a type of Peperomia Caparata, I think, the ripple peperomia, and you can get these in loads of different colours. You can get them in like an orangey one, you can get them in red, variegated ones like the Pink Lady, I think it's called. I'd really love a red one of these. I think there's one called the Raspberry Ripple that I think just looks so cool, and the Quito, which is the orangey sort of yellowy one. I had a long time ago a smaller plant and it came covered in mealybugs, and I just don't think it quite recovered, so I would like to give it another go with a healthier plant that has a better chance. But I just love the texture of these leaves. This is a peperomia that will definitely stay fairly compact, so if you don't have too much room, this is a fun one to add to your collection. I wouldn't give this one as harsh a light as some of the other ones I've mentioned today. This one sits like 4 feet away from a window that gets morning light, and it seems to be really enjoying it there. And this is really fun to propagate. The little new growth that comes through is really cute. I'll include a picture of some of the ones I have at the moment. So Peperomia Lilian. So next up, you'll have seen this one if you watched my latest plant haul video. This is a Peperomia Arbor Pixie Lime, and this was a bit of a rescue mission from Aldi, and since bringing it home it's doing really, really well. It was incredibly dehydrated, had a lot of damaged leaves. You can see the stems are quite bare in some places now, but it's been pushing out lots of lovely new growth. You can see at the top all of that's looking really good, and then hopefully you'll be able to see in there, I don't know how clear that is, but there's new tiny leaves starting at the base of the plant as well that are doing really well. And this has the coolest markings. I think hopefully you can see that there. Really, really cool pattern on these leaves. And this is one that I had again years and years ago, and it died so quickly. It was in a matter of days of bringing it home, it started to rot halfway up the stem and just really rapidly spread up and down the plant, and I couldn't save any of it sadly, but I'm really happy to have this one and it seems to be doing well so far. And again, we've got quite a few of the damaged leaves that I took off that are rooting, which is really exciting. You can see ones like that that are broken. I might end up taking that one as well. It'll be really fun to have some little props of this going that I can add into the plant. Such a pretty little plant. I think this is the teardrop. So I think the Polybotria is the raindrop, and I think the Arbor is the teardrop, but I'm not entirely sure. So you can get one that's sort of all a very bright green, you can get, which is just the standard Peperomia Arbor. This one's the Pixie Lime that does have some like ripply markings on the leaves, and it's a slightly lighter green. And there might be another variety as well, I'm not sure. This is a really, really sweet plant that I'm really happy to have, and I'm really happy that this one is doing well. So the last plant on this list, it's the last one because it does have a very mild, luckily, but a case of thrips, so I didn't want to handle it too much while I was touching on my other Peperomia. But this is the Peperomia Argyria, or the watermelon Peperomia, and this is a variegated one. I love that leaf there, it's really pretty. It's only a mild case of thrips, so I'm confident that I'll be able to get on top of it, but this is a really popular Peperomia for good reason. It's got the most incredible watermelon leaves. This is another one that I got in July for my birthday, so I've not had it for too long, but it's currently flowering. I did chop off most of the larger flowers. Just one of the first things I tend to do when I notice thrips is remove unnecessary parts of the plant, whether that's flowers or really, really damaged leaves. So I did take a picture, and I have lots of cuttings that are rooting and doing really well, but this is such a striking plant that I'm really enjoying caring for, and I'm hoping that over time as well some of the newer growth won't be quite so sort of curled. I don't know if you're able to see, quite a few of them are a little bit curled in, which is where all the thrips are hiding, annoyingly, like tucked in under the curved parts of the leaves. These are again really easy to come across, especially on places like eBay and Etsy. I constantly see people selling small like starter plants of this, so if you can get your hands on one, I definitely recommend. It's such a unique plant, and I'm really keen to see if we can get some more variegated growth as this plant settles in and starts to push out some new leaves, or from any of the leaves that I've propagated, maybe some of them will push out some variegated growth as well. So that is everything. Thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video, and I'd love to know if you're as Peperomia mad as me. Have you just started getting into them? Has this video made you want to buy any? I'm sorry if it has. Yeah, do you have any of the varieties I've shown you today? If you enjoyed this video and you'd like to see more, please like and subscribe, and if you'd like to find me elsewhere, I'm Amy's Greenish Thumb on Instagram and TikTok, and I'll see you next time. Bye!